In this Canva tutorial, let's take a look at how to blur only part of an image. So if you have just part of an image you want to blur, like maybe someone's face that was unintended to be in the image, or like for instance, this crowd here, if we wanted to blur out someone's face, or maybe a logo or something like that, no matter what we can do first is click on the photo that you want to blur out just a portion of and go to Edit Photo. Here at the bottom in Effects, we see Blur. When we click on Blur, we can actually blur either the whole image from an intensity level of 0 to 100, or now we can actually blur it with a brush. We can add blur and we can remove blur. We can adjust the brush size and then the brush intensity. Using your scroll wheel on your mouse, you can actually zoom in and out. And let's say that this coffee cup down here with the Starbucks logo, we don't actually want that on there. So we're going to move our brush down. We're going to adjust the intensity. These blur brushes add on top of each other. So you could do like an intensity of 2 and click and color this to start to blur it. If it's too much or not enough, you could click again to blur even more, right? So now we've blurred out the Starbucks logo. Maybe we didn't get permission from someone in this image to use their likeness, so we increase the brush size and say, you know what, we've got to blur this lady out a little bit more. Got to blur this guy out a little bit more, right? We have to hide identity for some of these folks because we didn't get permission to use their photo or something like that. You know, maybe there's something along those lines, or maybe you just want to use this blur brush to actually maybe just make some parts of the photo stand out more than other parts. But you can adjust the intensity, and like I said, you can kind of add that on top of each other, so you could keep clicking to keep blurring in certain areas. And so that'll just be like an intensity of 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and they'll just keep adding on top of each other. You can also remove blur. So we could remove the blur that we added to certain areas, right? So we added blur here, maybe we didn't mean to, so we can remove that blur. We can make our brush size larger to make sure we cover anything we added in there, etc. So pretty easy stuff. You can then just go to this blur back button, right? And then back to your photo, and it adds in those blur effects. You can see here now we actually blurred out that little coffee mug. Or not the coffee mug. We blurred out the logo on the Starbucks icon here. So now that's not something that's presented in that image. So if that's something that you needed to do, that's how you can blur certain parts of your images here in Canva.